quite yet. Joan, do you? I sent her the invite, so maybe she's just still working on getting on.
I'll check in with her, Margie, just a second.
Okay, great, thank you. So welcome, folks. We have our CCR&R system partners here. Really appreciate seeing everyone. And John hit the record button. Thank you, John. And he is also going to facilitate. He is actually the combination of the three of us today. He is John, Lisa, and me. Thank you, John.
You're welcome. You didn't really mean that, did you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. I may be pulled away with a phone call, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, thank you.
All right. So you want me to take over? Does that work? So
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
No worries.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
John, I'll let you know as soon as Betsy's on. She's joining. She let me know she'll be joining momentarily.
Perfect. Do we want to take one of our other agenda items first, Joan?
I don't think so.
Okay.
She's nearly on, just because she needs to be on top of the call.
Perfect. All right.
She's got to get on to other things.
It looks like she is on, just probably still getting audio.
Yes. So I'll just say thank you to everyone for once again making time in your very busy schedules to be with us today. We're extremely excited about the information that Betsy is going to be sharing with all of you. Hi, Betsy. Welcome to our CCR&R system call. We're so happy to have you join us.
Awesome.
Do you want to show any slides? Do you want us to make you a presenter, or are you just going to talk?
Yeah, no, I think I will show a few slides. If you can make me the presenter,
I will do that.
Yeah,
I will do that right now.
While we get the technology figured out, I just want to say to the famous CCR&R call that I just can't tell you how many awesome things we hear about you guys on a regular basis. It's like, we know that you guys are helping us keep the system afloat during this time, and that you're a great source of information for the people who badly need it. And I just wanted you to know that you're talked about often in only the best of ways. So thank you for everything you're doing to, keep things moving. So thank you.
So I think you have the screen now, Betsy. Thank you for that.
I'm gonna pull up my little whoosie whatsy here. So just the reason I'm joining you today is that I don't know if you guys have talked about this at all, but the state of Oregon is receiving $38 million from the federal government as part of one of the coronavirus relief packages, and it's for childcare. And so we've been trying to figure out how to put a plan together to get that money into people's hands who desperately need it. And probably better than I do, that providers are for sure one of the groups who need money. So we had put a plan together, tried to move it forward. It did not all get approved. There's a process for getting these plans approved that's really outside of our control. So, but we did get one part approved, and that was these operating grants for emergency child care providers. So these are people that are open, who have gone through that whole emergency child care facility form, filled out that form, completed it, and are serving children. And it's also for the regulated subsidy and family care folks who have who use ERDC. So about total universe, about 3,200 child care providers would be eligible to apply for this money. And what I want to do today is just orient you a little bit about how this grant program works, because the big ask at the end is we would like you to once again be there, as you always are, for providers, and especially those who may not be able to have a computer, because this does require an online application. And I know that that's something that's really difficult in this time where we're working from remote locations. And I believe you're also supporting the current applications that are out for our current programs, so Preschool Promise and Equity Fund and those. So this is not an easy task in terms of what does provide support mean, but one of the ways you for sure can provide support is knowing what this program is, knowing where to find the information so you can help people get to the information that they need. So I wanted you to be the first people that would see this little presentation here, if I can figure out how to make it go right. And look how it just goes so fast. So just to, again, this is only going to be $8 million, and which I shouldn't say only, it's a lot of money. But providers know that we have savvy providers know that we have $38 million. And so one of the main questions we're going to get is, where's the rest of it? And the answer to that is, we're still working on it. And that's the truth. And we had a plan that didn't work out. So we're kind of back to the drawing board trying to figure out how to best get that money organized. But we don't want to stop getting people some help in the meanwhile. So that's why we're calling this the phase one. We want people to know that there's more coming. So what's, oh, I lost my thing. Can you see the screen? Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
we can.
yes.
Oh, now we can't.
Oh, okay. It's probably because I can. There, now can you?
No, not yet.
Can you see? Okay.
Betsy, do you want me to navigate it? You could send it to me and I could do it.
Yeah, let me just try one more thing here. Oh, yeah, I turned my screen share off. That would do it. Okay, we should be back in now.
Yep, we see it.
Now we can see it.
I'm just not going to go into presenter mode because it gets it weird. So this funding is just, it is all formula based. It is not competitive, and it is, so if you apply and you qualify, you're going to get a grant award, is how this is all structured. And this is literally meant to be is operating money to help you stay in business, is basically what the point is. So eligibility, there's two ways to be eligible. So one is if you're an emergency child care facility, and then there's all these caveats. So you had to have been operating a licensed or recorded program. This is so specific, I know. On February 29th, 2020. That's one of the requirements. You also have had to have submitted your application to be an ECC provider by March 31st. And that is information we'll validate before we disqualify someone. We'll go in and actually look at their application and what the signature date is on it. And that this will be a source of questions from providers, is they will say, well, they'll get submitted mixed up with approved. And because the approval timelines have been lagging, they'll be worried that they're going to be disqualified. But the point here is they had to have submitted. This was a deadline at the time, so it was an important marker for people who were willing to kind of step up and get into this work. And that's who this money is really targeted at. So this March 31st is that they submitted their form. Next is that they are adhering to this health and safety guidelines, and those are the health and safety guidelines that are required under emergency childcare, and they're posted on our website. They get updated from time to time, but they are the rules for operating emergency childcare. And then the real kind of commitment that comes with this grant, with receiving this grant, is that you're committed to staying open through July. And that there's, again, a caveat. Is some providers they're stepping out of this work, and that's at our direction through our last temporary order. So the caveat is here, unless required to close according to the emergency childcare temporary rules. And that's because we are phasing out some of these pop-ups that you hear about. So that's what that means. The other group of providers who are also eligible to apply are regulated subsidy or relative care providers receiving ERDC. And they have to be open and caring for, this is a different requirement than the other side, and I can explain it, caring for a child of an essential worker. This is to make them qualified to get these federal funds. Federal funds have special rules attached. We get to that part on the following the health and safety guidelines, where they have to prioritize essential workers. We get that on with the other group of folks. With these folks, they're not under our health and safety guidelines, and so we have to specify that they have to be caring for a child of an essential worker. And then again, they have to be committed to staying open through July 2020. So any questions about eligibility before I kind of get to the timelines? Oh, okay, my wording is confusing. Oh, where did that go? Let's see. Yeah, so someone asked, the wording's confusing. February 29th was a Saturday, so the program had to be operating on this date to qualify. It means they had to have been active. So yeah, maybe the language needs to say an active license. Okay, I can do that, yeah. Okay, good feedback. So what is an essential worker? This you may have dealt with through our process, but the small folks that are with DHS that we do not regulate, they have not had any exposure to this because we have not had to engage with them on any sort of who's an essential worker type of conversation. So this is really targeted for that audience, so that they can find the resource, a link to the resource to figure out who's an essential worker and who's not. This, I know, continues to remain confusing for folks, but that's the resource. So the grant description, as I described, is it's to cover increased costs, food. It's just to supplement their existing revenue that they get. The grant amounts will vary by provider type, and this will be part of the formula that I will talk about in a minute. I'll show you a pay slide in a second. And folks who provided overnight care or weekend care during the month of April, we will use that in the formula to give them additional funds in this grant to recognize that really important, badly needed service. So here is the examples of the award. This is what we're planning on issuing. So $900 grant, and that's just a lump sum amount. That would be for the regulated subsidy or relative care folks. $2,880 to be exact for a registered family. Certified family would be $5,400. And centers and recorded programs, $6,000 per classroom with a limit of 3 classrooms. And then the weekend and evening care, they can get up to an additional $1,800 on top of those grants. And that will be prorated based on how much service they actually provided in the month of April. The application for this is all information that providers have, and literally the only thing that they would maybe need to look up or find somewhere is we're going to ask them for their license number or their DHS number. Other than that, this is self-attestation and it is answering some very simple questions about their operations during this time period. So in terms of providing assistance or helping someone or walking them through it, it should not be a high bar. This, in terms of all the applications we have out, this is by far the simplest and the fewest questions.
Hey, Betsy. This
Yeah.
is Ron. I just wanted to make sure, as you were going along here, is it okay to give you a few questions that were in there in that chat box? So,
Please do. Yeah.
the one of the questions was, can the slides be shared to this group? And then you already addressed how much is available per program. A question around clarifying around the pop-up program. So if a pop-up program that was not recorded or licensed prior to February 29th will not qualify. And I think that's actually kind of got two things in there. One is whether there were a program that was an approved emergency program of any type before February 29, and then pop-ups, I think you had stated something about may not be qualified for this. So I'll let you answer.
Yeah, some will and some won't. And what we're trying to, it's confusing, I'll just acknowledge it, but we're trying to really thread the needle of recognizing that the example that was given yesterday, that it's probably the best example to share, is if you have a YMCA in a region and they are offering 5 programs, and maybe before all of this, 2 were licensed, 2 were recorded, and now during this crisis, they stood up a new one at a new site. That's technically a pop-up. As a policy decision, all 5 of those sites would be eligible. And the reason why is because of that February 29th question. So the February 29th question is, did you operate a licensed program on February 29th? And that is to make sure that we are including folks who did, start up services that were needed and of service to the community, and we want to recognize that. At the same time, we are also trying to target these funds toward our existing network, which we would consider the YMCA in that situation part of our existing network, right? So if there was somebody, so who wouldn't qualify would be the Salvation Army. So the Salvation Army stood up the Kroc Center in Salem. They would not be able to answer yes to that February 29th question. So they would not qualify. So there's definitely some winners and losers here. And that's how we have chosen to deal with it.
And thanks, Betsy. Another question around confirming, is this a monthly award or a one-time award?
Yeah, so this is the payment schedule. Those amounts that were just up on the screen is their full amount, period. But we're going to distribute it according to this schedule here. So we're going to give 50% of the award immediately, like as soon as we can. And then 25% at the end of June, 25% at the end of July. And those are tagged to, are you still open? So if they in fact close or do something else in the meanwhile, go about have a change of heart and do something else, then we don't want to continue paying them. So that's the payment schedule.
And then
in order to get paid, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you can finish your thought.
I was just going to say, in order to get paid, we will be sending grant agreements to all of these awardees, and they will have to send those back with a W-9 form in order for us to be able to process the payments. The payments will be checks, and they're going to go out from the Department of Ed, or actually, I think technically they might go out from the Department of Administrative Services, but we'll be processing all of this internally at our agency. And the process of sending out the agreement and getting the W-9, we are using DocuSign for that whole process. So it should be able to be somewhat accessible for people to sign on their phone or be able to move that along fairly quickly, so we're not shuffling PDFs and signatures and papers all around.
And so related to the submissions, there's kind of a couple of questions. Can a CCR&R help fill out the form for a program, talking with the person over the phone and filling it out? And then will the applications be in Spanish?
Yes and yes.
Okay, excellent. Let's see. There's more words here. Bear with me. I hate reading, and everybody on here knows this. Some programs were scrambling to apply for the deadline, and then were told they had a few more days and submitted by the extended deadline. It seems unfair that they would be penalized. More of a statement.
Yeah. So I think that's for our other programs that have been open for months. So that's the and just so this is a different topic, but I can tell you that in those situations, if they scrambled to apply and then the deadline got extended because of the coronavirus situation, we did extend the deadline a month. This is for Preschool Promise, OPK, and for the Equity Fund. They could have continued working on those applications.
Okay. And then will the March 31st application deadline be extended for diverse language applications as their dates were extended? I think that's, yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Is that, yeah, Hannah, can you get on the line? Can you unmute and explain to Betsy what you're talking about?
Yes. Hi, Joan. Hi, Betsy. This is Hannah Annenson. When programs were applying to be emergency childcare approved sites, the applications came out in different languages at different times. And so I think the question is just making sure that if those programs got them in later, that they're not penalized by that March 31st date. I think that's the question.
Okay. I will have to look into that more to see what we're talking about in terms of a discrepancy. Because do you happen to know if the forms were not made available until after March 31st?
Betsy, this is Tammy. I can weigh in on that if you'd like.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other language applications. Yeah, the other language applications were about a week behind the English applications, and that's an about. The other extension that we gave was we knew that a lot of people were having some technical difficulties because they maybe didn't have access, they just didn't have the computer skills. So they were trying to fax things in, and we were hearing that our fax was jammed because there were so many coming in. So they would have to make trips to the store daily to try to get it faxed. So people with either language barriers or technology barriers, we did extend the time.
Past the 31st?
Yes, and I could go back and look at the date. It feels like April 8th is what's ringing a bell for me, but I'd have to do some research to find that exact date.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would need that because I might just move the date.
Okay, I will look.
And yeah, thank you. That is really good information.
Good question. Let's see.
Betsy?
Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, it's Joan. I just wanted to make note of the actual payment amounts to providers, knowing that people will be having these conversations. I just wanted to make note of the fact that it appears to me from that slide that these are, as it says, estimated awards. How would you want people to talk about the amount? You know, if people ask them questions so that give accurate information.
Yeah, so I will tell you why it's estimated, and then we can talk through how we would talk about this. So the reason it's estimated is because we have $8 million to spend. We have 3,200 providers. We don't, if they all applied and all certified centers and recorded programs all have 3 classrooms operating, this is information we don't know, right? We don't have enough money to pay everybody. So this is our $8 million is based on estimates on how many people we think are going to participate in this, how many classrooms each of these types of providers for the ones that are per classroom are going to claim. And the weekend and evening care is a total swag. We have no idea. So we have estimates built in for that too. So the question is, I'm going to forward here to the timeline for a minute. When we receive the applications back and then look at everything all at one time, because we're going to have a due date for these. And then we will know the whole universe of everything that's come in. And then we will be able to, again, we're going to fund everybody who qualifies, but we may adjust the awards up or down, either way, depending on the applications that we've received. So that's, it just, and so the caveat on the slide is the awards may be adjusted based on demand. And that's, I think, how I would say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk just a little bit before we take more questions, Betsy, about these dates? Because I think it's important for people to understand this window is pretty tight here for application.
I do. Yeah, I just have a couple more here, and then I think we can rock and roll however you like. So that we are targeting for the applications to open on Friday. And this is the online application system that we use for our other grants that we'll use for this one too. We hope to post the RFA, which is basically a 4-page document or so that basically outlines all the same information, on tomorrow is our goal. It's in translation right now, and so if it gets delayed, that will be why. But our goal is to post the RFA first. That will send people a buzz, I'm sure, but we want people to have time to kind of digest it and be getting prepared so that when the application opens on Friday, it's not such a panic. Then on Friday, the application opens, we will have a webinar. That's what you're actually looking at right now, are the slides for the webinar, posted in both English and Spanish. That will be a recorded webinar, not a live one, on May 1st as well. So the applications close on the 11th. We go through, a validation review process. So we have anomalies between the information that was provided to us and information that's in our databases, like around, are they who they say they are, those kinds of questions, and we're going to need to run all that down. And then we'll start issuing grant agreements the week of May 20th. So that's kind of a high-level overview of that. They have to apply through our online portal. It's called SurveyMonkey Apply. Maybe you have experience with it. And then note the last line. This is my last slide. Note the last line. I'm hoping you'll let me leave that in here. So this is just, resources. Our FAQs will be updated every day. On our website, we will have the RFA in English and Spanish. We will have the link to the application. It will also be in English and Spanish. And then we will also have our FAQs updated every day. We'll also have a user guide for how to use the SurveyMonkey Apply tool that will be up there in both English and Spanish as well. And that's mostly like, think of it as screenshots with arrows and, descriptors. So that's kind of everything that's coming and the rough timeline. And I'm happy to have any questions that you would like.
Wow, well, this is incredibly exciting, and it's coming fast once it finally was, got to the point that it is. So we appreciate that you're right here chatting with the CCR&Rs. And there are some additional questions, and we'll see if we can kind of bundle some of these. A question around, is it possible to provide some grants in part or whole for providers who submitted after or sort of in April or later? So is there like a way to do a partial payment, I think is the question for some of those emergency programs?
Yeah, I think that there was a policy decision just made early on that we were going to tie into the deadline date for this particular program. Other sources, other funding sources are going to hit different parts of the child care sector. And we in no way can make a commitment that everyone's going to get paid something.
Yeah.
That I can't make that statement. But we did want to we had publicized and made clear that there was this deadline. But I want to get the deadline right, you know, for all of our providers. If we had the deadline wrong for our non-English speakers, then we need to get that right. So.
Appreciated. And then how does the February 29th date work for regulated subsidy, essentially, since they didn't have to apply?
Yeah, it won't apply to them. The application will take you to one set of criteria or the other, depending on what kind of program you are. So I won't even ask them that question.
Okay. And then any other languages other than English and Spanish, or is the CCR&Rs are going to be helping those folks submit if they can?
Yeah, we can only do it in English and Spanish or French. So if you think that's helpful, we can fire that up. But otherwise, it's just English and Spanish for this, for where we are right now. The tools that we've got are a temporary, but it is what we're using right now. So.
Okay. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions from the field around these deadlines, and we'll probably have to troubleshoot these things in some ways. So as CCR&Rs are hearing these, but there's one question in here from Toby around a provider that submitted their application, but it got lost and she had to resubmit a second time. So it may have crossed that deadline.
Yeah, so how we're going to deal with that is we're not going to kick anyone out or tell them they're not qualified through the online application process only because of that line. If we do have data in our system on that submitted by March 31st issue. However, we are going to default to double checking the actual application and the signature date on the application that we received. That's actually our default, what we're going to go to. So if someone if someone's applied and it looks like they applied at the end of April, that's going to put it into the review basket. And in the review process, we will actually go and physically look at, well, it'll be virtually, but look at the application and check the date they signed it. And that's the date we'll make the decision based on. So, which is going to err on the side of them.
That's excellent. And then I think you said most of this was self-attestation, but will there be any verification of evening and weekend care if people are citing that?
Yeah, so what we're planning on doing is a check against the information they provided on their ECC application. So if they said that if they didn't mark that they're going to do weekend or evening care on their ECC facility application, and now they're saying they did weekend and evening care nonstop in April, that's going to again put them in that verification basket for us. And then we haven't worked this out totally yet, but we're going to have to send them something to have them verify, or maybe send in attendance records or something to verify it at that point if it's inconsistent with what we know that they told us they were going to do. If it's not in our favor, if they said they were going to do weekend care and then they end up not claiming it, then we will we won't care and we'll move on. But if the inconsistency is the other way, then we will follow up on that.
Much appreciated. Let's see, and I think this was maybe just a little bit further clarification around the submitting on behalf of a provider. So I think the question is, can our CCR&R staff actually, help them submit it with that conversation on the phone, or should they only be providing advice? I think.
Yeah, we have talked about this. I think it's fine if you guys help providers fill out their application. I think that there's multiple fields in there to even say who's the contact for this, but we also want to know who's the owner. So I think there's plenty of ways that we're going to know who we're dealing with. And if you guys can help in whatever way feels right for you, we're good. I think it's great.
Excellent. And then this one, I'm just going to call Danae out because she typed so many words, and I know I know she did this on purpose. So she's just thinking about the first slide and that there's going to be a lot of questions about who qualifies. And so she, I think, has an example. If a program applies and had a temporary license on February 29th, even though they had an active license previously, would they still qualify? And then there's a second part after that. I'll kind of
Well, this is where you're taxing my knowledge. A temporary license, are you talking about an ECC license? Or are you talking about something else? Is there another kind of temporary license?
Danae?
I'm here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we had a program who had an active license, and just before all of this pandemic and everything happened, they had a few compliance issues. And so their licensing specialist put them on a temporary license. So they did apply and get approved as ECC, but their license wasn't technically active on the 29th. It was technically temporary. So that is where my question came from.
Gotcha. I don't know. I will have to, that is a good scenario that I'm going to have to go. It seems to me if they were approved to be an ECC provider based on their compliance and whatnot, and they still were appropriate for that, then they obviously still had a license. It was just in some sort of temporary status. I would think that that would count as being qualified. But I would need to just do some double checking with our team to make sure we're in alignment on that.
And Danae had a second half to her question, which I think is more straightforward, which is if they had a program that was approved to do emergency child care, but they've since closed, would they qualify?
They would not.
They would not. Okay.
Yeah.
And then
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then the last question here in the chat box is, will there be any IT folks available to help people who are having issues? I'm assuming you mean having issues applying online. Is that right, Shannon?
Yeah, we won't have any IT specific people, but we will have people available to assist. So we will have, the phone will be staffed by a bilingual employee, and she will be versed in how to assist people. And I will tell you, and maybe you heard about this already, we had a bit of a false start. A few days ago, the application in its previous form, which was much more complicated and involved, was left visible after testing, and it wasn't supposed to be, because it wasn't even it hadn't even been approved yet, so it wasn't supposed to be out. We had just been testing some of the workflow, and providers found it at midnight, and by the time I logged on at like 7 in the morning, we had 200 providers had already applied. So that was under a not tested, complicated application. And we got some good information and feedback from that too, actually. So that actually, though, was, although so traumatic for me personally, it was also reassuring to know that, people figure it out. So that was with no instruction, no notice. It wasn't even done. And yeah.
Well,
all right. Well, John, I know Betsy probably needing to move on to some other things too. Wondering if there's any last questions that people need to ask before we move on. Of course, we can have questions emailed if you have questions after the presentation. So, and yes, Eva, I can say that the people that applied to the wrong application are been notified, so that they're not thinking that they've already applied. So no worries there. I just really want to acknowledge all the incredible work that Betsy and a number of other people on our team at ELD have done, which to stand up this grant program. I know that we all have been anxious to have these funds available, and they just really have been tireless. So thank you, Betsy, for what you're doing and what your staff have been doing. And I know that all of you as R&R directors and other system partners will do everything you can to support providers. Obviously, we want to try to get everybody in that we can during this time. So thank you for listening so intently. And thank you for making the time to talk to us, Betsy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Betsy. This is
Joan.
great.
Thank you to everybody. I just want to appreciate you being this very strong network and backbone during this really trying time. And it's just like we keep thinking of more ways and more ways we need your help. And I'm sure this won't be the last either. So thank you.
So one final little question though, folks are asking about the presentation. I'm assuming we want to get these webinars recorded so we have the accurate set of slides, which may still undergo a few little tweaks and changes, but once that's completed, we would be able to share the slides. Is that a fair guess?
Yeah, I would ask that we not share it now. I would have said yes at the beginning of the call, but based on some of the feedback that I've gotten during this, really want to go back and look at that, the wording on a couple of those eligibility criteria. And once that stuff goes out, you know as well as I do, it's really hard to get back in. So let me get that fixed and run all that down. The plan is to get these webinars posted this week in tandem with the application. So if we can share it beforehand with you, then Joan will do so.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for all your questions, everybody. Bye, Betsy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks, Betsy.
Bye.
All right, so we're moving into the temporary orders discussion, and I'm wondering, Tammy, do you have any slides or anything, or Joan, that anything we need to put up around that, or is this just conversational?
You might be muted, Tammy. Sorry.
Yes, I was. Thank you, Joan. No slides for me. I was just I figure people have quite a few questions, so I was just gonna talk on a few of the highlights from the new executive order and then allow time for questions.
That sounds perfect.
Okay. Well, as you know, on Friday, late day, well, on the 23rd, the governor put out a new executive order that basically took off the April 28th time for licensed childcare programs to be closed. And the new order that the governor put out really didn't specify a new date because, as we know, when we're all hearing Dr. Fauci say the virus sets a timeline, we can't set a timeline. And so the new order from the governor was not specific around that. The new order from the governor did two things. You know, it extended the closure of childcare, but it also gave the early learning division some specific authority to regulate what emergency childcare looks like. So it really handed that authority down to the early learning division. So then on Friday, Miriam Calderon put out an executive order in follow-up to the governor's, where it went through and reiterated things that were already in place around stable group size and essential workers, added in a few more clarifications, and made a little bit of a change to certified family providers. So much of it was the same. There's a few things, though, that it did get adding. It specifically gave Office of Child Care the authority to oversee those emergency programs and deny, revoke, or take action if we have concerns that a program is not operating safely or if they're not operating in conjunction with what the emergency order states. Right now, we're in a time where our licensors can't go out and put eyes on programs. So if we have concerns that children aren't being kept safe or that policies and procedures put in place by the OHA ELD guidance document or the executive orders aren't being followed, then we might have to take some action and have the program cease operating. So it gave us that authority to do that. It also clarified for certified centers that they need to have as stable a staff with the children as they possibly can. The OHA ELD guidance document already referenced having stable staff with the children, and we know, obviously, if we're wanting stable groups of 10, not rotating staff in and out, that really defeats the purpose. So it really made it clear that centers need to prioritize having the same group of teachers with the same children daily. The big change in this order, I would say, was for certified family. It opened up the opportunity to certified family to serve a second stable group of children if they could put those children in an area of their home that did not allow access to the two groups. So basically having two stable groups instead of just the one that they've been previously allowed. I anticipated that we would just have a flood of emails on Monday morning. So I worked over the weekend and got some policies and procedures in place for our staff. And the flood didn't come quite as much as I thought it would. We've gotten 5, 10, 15, we've gotten, about 30 inquiries statewide, and I thought that there was going to be a lot more. I think a lot of the interest that we've heard is programs are exploring it. They weren't quite ready to submit their plan. So I think that that'll come as programs open, then they'll have to think through how they can keep those two groups separate. And the emergency order also gave some really clear guidance around the inability to disenroll children of essential workers. We've been getting a lot of questions from programs to the effect of, I have health problems myself, or there's a vulnerable population in my house, and it makes me nervous to care for a medical worker's child. And our guidance to them is, if you're signed up to do emergency care, you are required to care for essential workers' children. If that's not a choice that you can make right now, that's okay. And we support that and understand if you can't make that choice for your family and for the other children you have in care. But if you can't care for essential workers, then you can't qualify as an emergency childcare right now. Another big change is that we are no longer accepting the applications for the unlicensed pop-ups unless that program can demonstrate that there is a lack of childcare capacity in their area. And according to the data that we get from 211, there's a lot of childcare available out there. So it would, they really have to be able to show the community need. It's not just going to be an automatic, you can apply and regardless of the community need. So that was the other big change that came out in this executive order. So now let's open it up to questions.
I have a quick question. Yeah. Taya from Lane County. So I think I know the answer to this, but I think there's still some confusion among the providers. They can care for whoever they want to, basically, right? They only have to prioritize essential. In the beginning, I thought I heard like, well, no, if somebody's working from home, they need to keep their kids home and they can't go into childcare. And I think maybe the providers are under that impression too, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. What the executive order really says is they must prioritize. But with the conversations that we're having with providers is that we would like them to really have serious conversation with parents who are not essential workers or who do have other options, because we know that the more people are out there and the more people are in childcare, the greater the concern for spread. But the executive order does not say exclusively care for essential workers, but we're really trying to encourage them to have those hard conversations with their programs.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Do we have other questions, clarifications for Tammy?
John, this is Danae, and I'm just going to go ahead and start talking so you don't have to read all my words.
You're the best.
Hi, Tammy. I am from Peace Curry, and I am just curious, as you can imagine, when the governor put out the new order last week without an end date, we had a lot of providers who had not applied for ECC who got a little nervous about not having an insight. And so they're on the fence about applying now to become ECC. And I just want to make a little bit of clarification because I actually had one who texted me while I was in this meeting. And so here is my question. If they did not apply to be ECC, and now with the new governor's orders, they feel like they need to get back in business so that they can make an income, they would not qualify for this CARES Act funding, correct? Because they were not approved prior. But yet, if they open, they also will not qualify for the SBA or unemployment, correct?
You know, Joan, I'm wondering, because I know you've been a little deeper in these conversations than I have, so feel free to jump in, Joan. My understanding from Betsy's presentation is they would not qualify for the first round of funding. And in terms of future rounds of funding, we don't know yet what that's going to look like. And then I couldn't speak to the unemployment situation.
Okay, because that is this one provider who texted me just now had said, I got denied for unemployment initially. Do I reopen as an do I open now as an ECC program or try to apply for unemployment again? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question, because she's saying how can I get my business back in business? And it seems that if she does apply to be ECC, she can't take advantage of this CARES Act funding. So
she would not,
but then she'd be disqualified to get unemployment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that this is a little tricky for our programs that did close now, because they're kind
of. We've lost your audio.
Did your provider apply for unemployment prior to when they allowed self-employment people to go apply?
Yes.
Yeah.
So she applied initially, got denied, and now she's like, what do I do? Because I need an income. And I mean, I would love to say, apply for ECC so you can get this CARES Act funding, but that is not an option now. So I'm really nervous about my programs that did close initially and now have no financial options potentially to get back into business. So I asked this question because I want us to be thoughtful of those programs, because we could see when the governor does say we can open back up, a huge decline in programs that do reopen because they didn't have resources to stay in business. So I'm sorry. I just wanted to point that out, that there is that whole round of people that now are kind of in a bind financially.
Well, I understand what you're sharing. So let me just be really clear that she is not eligible for what is the phase 1 funding. And as this information becomes publicly available and people are coming to you, these kind of distinctions are going to be really important. That's why Betsy really spent the time to talk about that. This is phase 1. We are determining how other dollars will be spent. You know from previous conversations that we've had, we had hoped to offer other grant programs with these funds, but they were not approved. One of those was around helping closed programs reopen. So we are going to continue to pursue a pathway, because we also understand that it will be very difficult for some programs to reopen. It does seem as though it might be worth it for this individual to explore unemployment since they've made the change for self-employed folks. And then the other possibility is, you know, essentially reopening and looking for, you know, families to come into the program who meet the essential worker categories. We have about 8,000 vacancies right now statewide. We have way more supply right now than we actually have demand. So that's another driver in this whole situation. It's that a lot of families are really following the governor's order and they're staying home. You know, as we move through these different aspects of the framework, remember the conversation that we had with Alyssa last week where she was presenting the framework and talking about, you know, we're in this place right now where we're trying to meet it was called gating criteria. We need to see cases go down, deaths go down, testing go up. You know, there's the conversations that are being had with the childcare workforce, like the survey links that I sent out to you this morning, asking you to help get those out. So there's a lot going on, but we're still looking at quite a bit of time yet. No one knows exactly before there's going to be the phase 1 reopening, of which childcare will be a part. So we will continue to work to create grant programs with the rest of the of the funds that are not spent with this initial phase one to try to provide support to additional childcare providers. But I think Betsy said this several times, this funding alone will not be enough to save all of the childcare programs in Oregon. Like, we have to continue to advocate for more funding from the federal government, and we have to help folks be able to get back into business serving children and families. Like, that's going to be the most important avenue to them, to having a financial support. Because unless something really changes federally, we may not see additional childcare money. Like, we hope we will, but we may not.
So I want to pause for just a second, because we scheduled this particular meeting for just an hour, because, it was going to be one of those weeks where we could kind of retool and adjust and kick back in next week. However, as you imagine, everything changes pretty rapidly around here. And so I want to see if we can, if there's any sort of last questions here, and I would urge everyone, as you're starting to really process this pretty dense and complex sets of information, that we may want to, have you guys getting your questions to us as you're thinking of these things, and then we can kind of package them and get them to the right people to get answers back. And then I'm sure our next Tuesday's meeting will be pretty packed with sort of continuing to discuss how best to support people with these grants.
This is Shannon. I had one question that can be answered for next week, if possible.
Okay.
If we've gotten any new, I might have missed it, but the new communication for DHS LERC, since that paper needed to be revised. From last week, there were some new things, and that paper's sort of obsolete now.
Yes, and actually, we're just continuing. I'm sorry, this is Jen with DHS. We're just continuing the April policies into May at this point in time. So there's no change to what was implemented with the unlimited absent day and unlimited closure days for providers.
There was that CPR waiver, sort of, that they didn't have to do the pre-service CPR.
Yes, so CPR is still able to be done after listing. The other online training requirements, the Intro to Health and Safety and RCAN, those have been moved back to pre-service because we weren't getting any of the information saying that people were having trouble accessing it. Though I think we've started to hear some questions come up about if there are other formats or other ways that those trainings can be offered, because some people don't have the access to computer labs or things like that they would have accessed previously. But for now, those have been moved back to pre-service. We still have the waiver of the fingerprints, and basically we're aligning with ELD with the licensing requirements for both the fingerprints and the CPR first aid. So once all of this is said and done, the classroom version of CPR will be required, and then also the fingerprints will be required, but we'll have kind of some time to get those providers who have gone through in this modified process. We'll have some time to get them back up to speed. So it's not like it'll be immediate that those changes will occur.
Okay, so that form that we have that shows all the stuff is still good.
I believe so. Sorry, I have a little reminder for my kiddos to switch over to a different subject at the hour. So that was going on. But yeah, so the main piece that we were really being asked questions about was the closure policy and absent day policy, because we've been anticipating some pretty big changes with those, and we're just not changing those for May. So that's going to continue.
Thanks, Jen. And there was an additional just quick question around, so if just to be as clear as possible, so if programs are closed completely, they can still bill for ERDC in the coming month?
They can, as long as they're still connected to the family. So we do have some families who might be connecting new providers or connecting a new provider as a secondary provider, so still keeping them on, but they might be splitting the hours between them. So there could be some changes there. We also have quite a few families that are switching over to different programs, or like switching from ERDC to TANF, and so their ERDC childcare has ended last month or is ending at the end of this month, and so there's been a little bit of confusion with providers for that. So we've been trying to re-message that really the changes were in allowing more billable hours for the providers, but it didn't guarantee eligibility for the parents. So we just had a meeting this morning with our field staff where we were talking about the importance of talking to the families about the authorized work search period, which allows them to maintain ERDC after they've lost their job, if they're not really going to be a good fit for the TANF cash assistance program. And by not good fit, I mean families that have other sources of income coming in, like the unemployment benefits that have been increased, or child support, or something along those lines.
All right. Well, so I see, Joan, looked like I might have cut you off as you were going to come in here. We are over time at this point, but there are still some reasonable questions here in the chat box. Joan, what do you think? Should we try and capture a few of these real quick? How's everybody feeling to stick around for a couple of minutes, or we'll just try and get through this? So Mary, I think a real quick question from you was, when will the information on the grant go out to providers? And I believe that Betsy was stating they're shooting for tomorrow that the information goes out, but then the ability to apply would be slated for May 1st, I think is when it kind of goes live to apply in. And let's see, updates on Medic First Aid. I believe there's an announcement that should be coming out soon around Medic First Aid to CCR&Rs. Unless, I don't know, Tammy, are you able to speak to that? I know Ronnie was going to create some correspondence, but I didn't want to let the cat out of the bag.
I'm sorry, John, what was that question?
Oh, it was related to the Medic First Aid and the extension of...
Let's hold off until I see something in writing.
So, yep, I think that's still in process. It's on the way, Taya. Hopefully good news, but we'll see. And then, Eva, you had a question in here. How does the state get approved to stand up the grant funding from CARES? Is this approved with the state system, or is it federal approval? Wondering if there's a place for us to influence it or any advocacy. I don't know, Joan, are you?
It's a in-state process. Of course, we have to follow federal guidelines, and it is, as I believe mentioned to all of you a couple of times, there's 42 funding streams for states within the CARES Act, and so there actually is a coordinated response that's happening internal to the government of Oregon. And so there's a way that agencies related to the funding streams, they will administer, put together their proposals. Those are then reviewed by the governor's office and the legislative fiscal office and the chief financial officer for the state and others. And they are making decisions that are both looking at the short-term immediate needs, as you can see with this grant proposal, and included in the approval for this grant is also the continuing ERDC changes that we all are continuing to have providers benefit from. Those are part of the COVID-19 response, the co-pays being waived, the being able to pay during absences, like that is part of this grant program as well, even though it isn't specifically talked about in the same way, because of course there's a different application process for that, but that is part of the state's response to the impact of COVID-19 on providers. So when Betsy says the rest of our grants weren't approved, what she meant really was that the state review process did not approve the other ways in which we proposed to spend the $38 million. And so we're back at the drawing board. I'm sure we're going to have some other good ideas, and we will be continuing to put those forward, and we'll keep you informed about them. So there's not really an avenue for you all to influence the process. What I would say is, just like happened today, you had a lot of really great questions. You helped Betsy kind of clarify her thinking. We're going to have a better webinar for providers based on your feedback. And so what I would be looking for is being able to get input from you where there's an opportunity for that to happen as it becomes clear what we're going to be aiming for the rest of the funds going forward. So.
All right, and just about the time, I think we have no more questions in the chat box. A few more popped in. So let's see, is there anything going to come out in writing about ERDC for May? I think it's really important for providers to understand CARES funding was available to secure that funding for May. And I think that Jen had to jump off, so we may need to follow up with her around that and what'll be out in writing. But I do think, to Joan's point, it's really important for people to understand how all these things are working together and how those funding sources are combined to make this work. And then, Jerry, was there a process for supporting closed providers? The problem or the concept, was that the reason it got or didn't get approved?
I think that when you are someone that comes from a financial mindset, like our chief financial officer and our legislative fiscal office, like these are individuals who have experienced many fiscal downturns. They have been through the crisis of, the 2008 crisis and others perhaps. So they're thinking long term. So what they really want is a proposal that makes the funds potentially be available for a bit longer. So we're trying to make this short-term effort to hopefully keep folks afloat. And then, part of these conversations is around what aspects of these funding should be made available and over what time period. So that's about as much as I can really say on their feedback, is that I think there's an understanding that childcare is a business and that many businesses are shuttered right now. Many businesses are suffering. Many people are worried about what will reopen or not. And so they're trying to really think, I think, holistically about how we approach using the remainder of these funds. So we'll tell you more as soon as we know more.
So I would like to honor the fact that we were trying to keep this to an hour, and many of you may have made plans around your schedules that prevent you from continuing to have additional discussions around this, even though I know there's probably still questions. So I would just suggest that as you're thinking of things, please send them to Margie, Lisa, and I, and we will figure out how to get all of you answers to these very vital questions, because as has been stated multiple times today, you guys are providing a huge amount of support to these providers, and these grants are part of the biggest part of trying to help them stay afloat and get lifted back up, in addition to all the other supports you guys have been providing. But this is one of those answers that they have been asking for quite some time now, since they've known that money was coming to our state. So as you're sensing other things are bubbling or brewing, please make us aware of those too. We want to help you be able to message all of this stuff in the most positive light possible, because we have to have a unified front around all this, so that information is going out to providers and they're feeling like they are getting some support around this. And so ensuring that your staff feel prepared is what we need to do as we're working forward on this. So any last words, Joan, Margie, Lisa? We will.
Thank you for everyone that little extra time, and enjoy the rest of your days, the degree feasible, and please send your questions because they help us improve what we're doing. So take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.